Your weekly fix of Dope Stroke podcast is back. Myself, Chris Trott, is joined as always by Chrissy Ryan, our co-host. But this week, the Funk de la Skunk isn't with us. Dazzler's a no-show, Bubsy. What's this all about?
Well, I think we can let him off this week, can't we? Because he was in. We won't say too much, but he's been in hospital for a little bit. He's all fine. He's all good, but he's at home resting. So we knew he wasn't going to be here. But we have got a good standing, haven't we? We've got a better
We have
looking and a taller standing.
just as many hair follicles, I notice, are going on in this man's head. But what we've got for you this week, we have, the truth be told, is the Dope Stroke couldn't run without the man we've got on this week. In addition to some other people that hopefully we'll see them in the future, maybe. That'll be an interesting podcast, won't it? Those that are listening behind the scenes. And then also, though, he's a big part of Rocket Yard Sports, and he's helped myself and Chris Ryan with our brands as we've gone forward. I know Chris has been involved a lot longer than that, but we have one of the sickest amateurs, I think, out there, right? He might be sick in the head with this. We've got Lloyd from Dope Stroke, who's the right-hand man. So start off, Lloyd. Firstly, welcome to In Front of the Camera. And before we get going, I want you to tell the golf listeners a little bit about what it is you do and how you got into that role, because you love golf, mate. It's got to be said, as much as me and Bubsy.
I need to jump in first, actually. We're introducing Lloyd into this podcast. I reckon he has done more podcasts than me and you together, Trottie.
100%. Well,
Lloyd runs his own podcast.
Yeah.
He's the OG. We're learning off him today.
Well,
tell us then,
boys.
Lloyd.
Yeah, stick with me, boys, and I'll show you how it's done. But no, thank you. You flatter me with all your niceties at the beginning, Trotty. That's not unlike you, so thank you very much. Normally, some other words thrown in there, but yeah, that was good. Yeah, how did I get here? So, yeah, actually, I only started playing golf. What sort of 2000? I don't know. It was about 8-9 years ago now. I think it is. So you work that out yourself. You will get the numbers on that one. And I only started playing because I finished playing football. Did quite a few injuries to the knee. Lots of friends also stopped playing football. So we, as you do, migrated over to golf just through friends of friends that we knew. And just got a bit too addicted to it, to be honest. Wanted to get better. Ended up finding myself at the driving range every day because I didn't have anything else to do apart from work during the daytime and spend evenings at the driving range. And starting just before COVID, I actually moved jobs from working in the City of London back to where I lived in Harlow. It's just in sort of North Essex, with the dream of playing more golf. So my whole role was to quit work in London, get some more time back, work locally, and then just play more golf and become a golf professional. Obviously, that's what you do. So did that, worked for a local company, and then during COVID, they decided to make me redundant, as most companies did. But at the time, I wanted to get out anyway. I wanted to get into golf and work, take my skill set from branding, marketing, design, all that sort of stuff, into golf. And I started my own podcast, as Chris alluded to, called One Pod Life, where I spoke to, and I still try to speak to sort of elite amateur golfers or the golfers that are on the developmental tours that are trying to make their way onto the higher levels, because that's kind of where I wanted to be, or the level I aspired to, or the next step up from where I was. And I think I was about 10 episodes in, and I met Daryl once before at a YouTube golf day that Rick Shields put on up north somewhere, and reached out to him and said, can I speak to one of your athletes? And he said, yep, no worries. But before you do, I want to come on the podcast and talk about sports sponsorship. Now, in my head, I was like, great, 2 episodes for the price of 1. Easy peasy. He comes on, and as you know, Dazzler does talk a lot when you give him the chance to. And he spoke for about an hour about sports sponsorship, pressed the finish recording, and then he said, okay, tell me about yourself. So I told him about myself, told him what I did from a design perspective, brand marketing, wanting to get out, being made redundant from my current job. And he was like, oh, okay, I need someone to do 1 day a week doing some design work. That was 6 years ago. And I've now been with him for 6 years, worked up to operations director here at Rocket Yard Sports. And as you said, Trotty, my main role is to really help brands or individuals such as yourself and Chris really sort of build out the business from a brand perspective, help them get a clear strategy as to what they're trying to do within the world of sports marketing, We now got a strong team of about 6 or 7 of us, where it was just me and Daryl for a while. And and this is where I am today. Just a few more greys from Daryl, but yeah, all good.
Do you know I didn't know any of that, and I
Did you
think
not?
no, I did. I didn't know how you started, so it's interesting to hear. So let's get into first off this two-part question. First off, the size of the task in front of you when you took the role, because you said you were working for companies and COVID came and it set you in a funny spot. What like the change? And this is actually going to be a three-part question. Do you now play more golf than what you did before? Which I'll let you answer.
I think we all know the answer to that one.
Yeah, and you said like you help brands in golf and people in golf. I mean, it's an ever-changing landscape, and the truth is Chris and I were both very established in our careers before we came into social media. So you must see people coming in from a completely different angle than what we. I know that, to be fair, we're quite similar and probably in the same bucket when Rocket Yard hands out its portfolio of who it has on offer. I would imagine we're not far from each other. But how do you pick talent? So three-part question. Did you see it being what it is? Are you playing much more golf? And then how you guys pick talent to work with?
Well, when I first started, I was only doing 1 day a week with Daryl. I was doing, I think it was 2 to 3 days a week with people that me and my golf, helping them with social media design, just to kind of redefine their brand a little bit. So at the start, I was playing as much golf as I wanted to play. So it was great. I was out every day. Come out of COVID, it was fantastic. 6 years later, I don't think I played golf for about 2 months. But now we've got our simulators in the studio. I do hit a lot of golf shots. So I'm hoping that can transfer onto the golf course when I do actually get to play. And then, I guess get on to the other points that you said around what do I see when the brands come in? Yeah, so we deal with brands that are, again, like you said, are very established. So all we're really trying to do is to align them a little bit more to what their goals are when it comes to the outcomes that they want. So some might just want to have a better brand presence. So we might look at how we can tie them up with influencers or players in that area, and then others will just come in cold off the street, brand new to the sector. We're a brand new brand, and we're trying to move forward. And then that's where, sometimes it is hard to get them off the ground from a social media perspective. As you know, it's a hard landscape to navigate, and trying to build a presence on there and get the name out there is quite hard. So we will hopefully come up with a few different angles or pathways to go down to get that level. We're currently doing that now with one of the brands we're working with, and we're just trying to establish what the look and feel of the brand is, the tone of it all as well, to hopefully get to a point where, hopefully within 6 months to a year, we know exactly where we need to be and the people we need to be speaking to. And then, like you said, with yourself and Chris, you're already kind of established, but then it's like, okay, what's the next steps? Where are we going with the brand? And we don't necessarily work with individuals. We work with brands. So again, with yourself, Trottie Golf and Chris Ryan Golf, they're brands that we can actually build out. It just so helps that you two are the face of those brands.
I think from my point of view, and I'm guessing you're going to be in the same boat, Trottie, because you're coming from a sort of different, same sort of background as me. I was a golf coach, and we'll kind of get onto the purpose of the podcast in a minute, but I was a golf coach and developed myself as a golf coach. And day to day, that was my job, giving one-to-one lessons, group lessons, golf schools, golf trips. And then you fast forward a few years and you're running a business, and you're having to deal with partners, and you're dealing with contracts, you're dealing with brands. And that's not a space that I was ever really working towards understanding, so to have Rocket Yard and someone like yourself, Lloyd and Daryl, basically fighting on that front for me and doing all that work, it takes such a big amount of pressure off me. And obviously it's my platform that I've built, but without your expertise and Daryl's expertise, I would not be in the position I'm in, because it's just not anything that I thought I'd ever have to be doing. Speaking to brands, dealing with contracts, it's just something that's not really that natural to me. So it's a massive help, and I'm guessing it's the same for Trottie. But just coming on to kind of what we saw this podcast being, obviously Daryl isn't here. We knew he wasn't going to be here. He's out. We'll call him injured for the foreseeable future. Lloyd is an amateur golfer, a good amateur golfer, but we thought that sometimes. We thought that our audience who listens to this podcast are probably going to be similar to Lloyd. They're amateur golfers, they're avid golfers, they're keen golfers. And amateur golfers get obsessed with the game. They get obsessed with equipment and swing and technique. And there's probably hundreds of thousands of questions that go around a golfer's head that they would love to be able to stand in front of an expert club fitter like maybe Trottie or a coach and just ask those questions. So we basically tasked Lloyd with firing some questions at me and Trottie that not only he would like answered, but maybe that he thinks the average golfer would like to be answered. So I believe that you've been squirreling away in the background since this morning and making a few notes and some questions. Is that right?
Yep. ChatGPT has been working hard for the last 2 hours. So, no, I've got some questions. I know I chew the ear off you two on a regular basis anyway. And I said to the girls earlier in the office, I said, I've only got about 1,000 questions, but I can't think of one right now.
Stage fright.
So stage fright, yeah. So, so I've got a few written down here. I've tried to segment them into questions for each of you. And I'm sure other questions will come out of there. And I've got a couple of questions towards the end that are probably more geared towards my own game because why not when I've got this opportunity to speak to you two on a proper basis. So I guess let's start with, let's go with Chris for the first one.
There's two Chris's.
Sorry. There's only one Chris in my head. There's another one called Trottie. That's it.
Right.
Chris and Trottie. If I only had an hour a week for practice, which feels like that is what the basis is right now for my life of golf, how should I divide that time up? Is it short game? Is it full swing? Or is it putting? Or is it a combination of all of the above? And how would you structure that out?
Good question. I mean, that's real life, isn't it? You know, family, job, love your golf, want to improve, don't get a huge amount of time. So you've maybe got, a short window to improve. And you can look at the best players in the world and you can learn from them, but ultimately they've got more time. I think it's a question that comes up a lot. And I actually had an email come through this week from someone I've met before, but he's in New Zealand at the moment. He was asking me about his golf game. And he sort of said along the same lines. He said, how do I get down to the next level? And I think if you've only got an hour and you really do want to improve, and when I say improve, I mean shoot lower scores, that has to start with knowing your game. It has to start with understanding your game. And when I say understanding your game, I don't mean sitting down and thinking, am I good with the driver? Am I good with the irons? Am I good with the putter? You've got to have stats. You've got to have stats that show you, on average, over a course of 10, 15 rounds of golf, where you're losing your shots. Doesn't take that long. If you start tracking your rounds of golf, you'll start to see the patterns occur. And it may well be that you see that you're weaker off the tee. It may well be that you're weaker with your irons. It maybe that you're weaker with your wedges, bunkers, chipping, putting, wherever it may be. Once you've got that information, you're then at least armed to say, okay, well, for this hour, I know I need to be working on my driver. It then needs to go a little bit deeper than that. And it needs to say, well, if I'm not performing as well as I need to with my driver, why is that? Is it because I'm missing it left? Is it because I'm missing it right? Is it because I'm not hitting it far enough? So then you've got to dive a little bit deeper and you've got to sort of say, okay, well, I need to understand why I'm missing those fairways. That might then be a case of seeing a local pro or having an online lesson and actually getting some information and getting someone to specifically tell you what you need to do with that golf club. And then if you've got the stats, you know that it's driver that you need to work on, you've had a lesson, you've been told by PJ Pro what you need to do and what the drills are that you need to do, it suddenly becomes really easy to go to the range and spend the hour productively. But if you don't have that information, you generally work on either things that you enjoy doing, which is not really getting you anywhere, or you work on the things that you think you're not great at. And I had this as an experience for me. I've always hit the ball a pretty long distance off the tee, but I'm not the most consistent. And I've always felt that my driving isn't that great. And as soon as I started tracking, driving was always my strongest part of the game. And it was because I hit the ball a pretty long distance. Even when I missed fairways, it was still a pretty good drive. It left me, let's say inside 100 yards from the rough. I could still score from there. So it really, as soon as I started tracking my rounds, it really changed my mindset to say that drive is actually not a weakness. Drive is a strength, which allowed me to then focus on my weaknesses. So once you know what you're working on, it then becomes a case of let's do some drills within the hour. Once those drills start to change your goal swing and you start to be able to change your ball flight and you start to be able to see the ball flight that you want, that hour then needs to change to more what I would call transference drills, which is how do you take that to the golf course? So that's more spacing those drives out, visualizing fairways, going through your routine, giving yourself some pressure that you've got to hit 7 out of 10 fairways before you can go home, starting to make it more gamified before you then take it onto the course. So got to start with stats, got to understand your game, and you've got to know what to work on. Most golfers don't work on the right thing, or they don't work on it in the right way.
Okay, sticking with stats then, because me and Trottie both use a program where we can track all those stats and it spits out all the numbers that we know. So you were talking about there about Chris about driver being the weakest. Well, you thought driver was the weakest part of your game. Driver used to be the weakest part of my game. Got fitted properly, I hope, and that's now turned into probably one of my strongest parts of my game. And my approaches have started to really slip in. So just to give you some numbers so you guys know. So last 20 rounds, strokes gained this is, so off the tee, minus 1.75. Not ridiculously bad, but still losing some shots.
Against what? Against what? What's your bench?
This is against Scratch Golfer. So I play off 4.3 if you want to be pedantic, but 4 is my number. So approaches, I'm losing 4.16 shots. Around the greens, I'm losing 1.36, but putting, I'm only losing 0.45. So my driver used to be the weakest part. I think I used to lose like 5, 6, 7 shots off the tee. And my approaches used to be really good. Now my approaches have flipped around and my driver's really good and my approach is really bad. So a question I was going to put to Trottie was, how can you sort of use stats to understand if the problems you're having are club related, swing related, or up here related? I don't know. Obviously, you're a big stat man, Trottie, so it would be a good question to ask.
So first off, out the gate, if you're now hitting more fairways, that's awesome because you can score from there. So clearly, whatever work you've done with the driver has improved, and then getting back to that random practice or however Bubsy defined that, you're improving off the peg. Perfect. So what I would look at in your stats to deep dive is I would look at your miss tendencies. So depending on how good the data is you're keeping, I would first off find out what your current spec of golf clubs is. Is it way off the mark as to what the sort of the average of what folks use is? I know your build. I've met you. I see how tall you are. So I'd get a general idea of basic specification just from looking at you. Then you've got a history of playing sport in football, soccer. You've already explained that. So there's some athletic ability. Great. You're passionate about the game. Great. So some of the outliers that you can put down, you're going to have a good base layer because you play off 4. So I'm like, okay, he's hitting more fairways. We have to look at miss tendency. In an ideal world, the next question I'd have, which I know you have, is what is your path? What is your face? And even this never leaves you, by the way. Like I played golf, and I've mentioned it before. Last time I played golf with Chris Ryan, I played horrendous. And it was, okay, what's your face and your path tendency? Because once you have that, then you can work on it. And it's actually good to have the face and the path consistently one way, because then you have a shot shape you can work on. I always had that. But the only reason I'm now drifting and not hitting it particularly good is because I've tried to change the tendency in a desire for it to look prettier and play better. But let's keep it on where you're at. So we're hitting more fairways. I'd first look at miss tendency. Having seen you hit a few shots, it's probably left and it's probably face is more square to the path than what it has been. So you've got rid of some shape. Plus age and flexibility. So that tends to come in a little bit more. You might have been playing a bit more. You play in the UK, so the weather's a bit crappy. So you're trying to keep the ball out the sky. So then anyone trying to flight it down, usually that gets steep, which then can change that start path. So straight away, I'm like, okay, lie angles could be a thing. And then beyond that, the low-lying fruit for anyone who's a coach, and I think listening to this, if your putting is okay, but your short game, you said, has dropped a bit as well, or isn't what it was, short game, if you're a 4 handicap golfer, even on the World Golf Handicap System, which I think is horrendous, but if you're a 4 handicapper old money, you're like a 5. You should really be aspiring to be a 1. Until you're sort of a 1, I think it's easy to get to a 1 on this world handicap system. That's all things relative. But with the amount of golf you have the ability to play, easy to get to a 1. And I think that you get there through short game. And I think that approach play can be a bit fickle because you're probably only playing once every. We said you haven't played in the last 3 months. So you're only playing once every now and again. Approach play is always going to be all over the place based on your age, your mobility, stuff you got going on in your life, stress levels, how clear are you, weather conditions. But if you can have your short game mustered, and that's what I grew my game. When I was at my best, my short game was dynamite. And I think if you listen to anyone who had a good peak in golf in their early 20s, and then you look at them now, why? And your short game is always miles away from where it was. And I think that that would be the first place. And then I'd look at lie angles, getting your miss tendency. But I'd always be reluctant with someone with power, speed, to go more upright. I'd look to go flatter. And the reason for that, and that's lie angle, is because it gives a softer ball flight. And I just think most people miss left more than they miss right that are right-handed golfers because they pull it because their mobility isn't where it needs to be. And they generally don't put the work in with someone like Chris who can monitor your game for you. They don't keep data. They don't use a launch monitor. If you look at the best players in the world, they have checkpoints that they go through every single day. And they appreciate that they wake up one day hitting it or feeling different to the next, and then they play with that tendency. Amateur golfers don't do that. But also, and there was a great podcast today with Michael Owen, a UK British footballer from the 2000s, 90s, 2000s. And we don't try and aim high enough. I'm sitting here telling you that I don't care if you're playing golf once every 4 months. You should still be a 1. I've seen you hit it. You should be a 1. Worst case scenario. And that comes with polishing up the short game. And that comes with just dialing in do you have a wedge chart? Do you know how far you hit? A 9 o'clock backswing 52, a 9 o'clock backswing 56. And that's like a clock face. Do you have all those numbers? Save you mountains of golf shots. Mountains.
So I've actually recently started doing that. So yeah, that's now in the sort of yardage book that I use. So that's all in there, and I've started to really dial that in. And the short game has been improving, which has saves me so many times. It's unreal. But yeah,
here's a question for you then, Trottie. Based on what you know about Lloyd's game, the stats he's just given to you, your knowledge of working with players, you talking there about maybe lie angles, maybe wedge charts, maybe practice. Do you think it's possible for someone of a 4 handicap to get down to 1 with 0 swing changes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All mental.
Yeah,
there'd be 2 books straight away. I did it with a buddy of mine, and I have to be very careful with it. I'm an amateur again now, reinstated, play a bit of golf at a golf club, and I have to be very careful with people ask you. Or my issue is I play golf with a group that I like the guys, and it's painful to see the low-lying fruit. But I never offer anything because I'm like, you start a journey with someone that maybe you don't want to go down that path because they might not want lessons. They might not want you to die. They might be happy with the way they're playing. But if someone is just blatantly obvious a simple suggestion can help them, then I'll always casually drop it in. And then if someone starts to ask questions, and this is a skill I've learned as time's gone on from my teaching, I'll drip feed it. I always used to get frustrated as a kid why my coach would always drip feed information. And the truth is you're layering it. And you're layering the student's understanding and you're layering the advice. Because if you change risk conditions, it impacts something else. My risk conditions are cupped on the way down. Why the hell do you think my path is left with a face open to path? And as soon as you start changing that, which is what I've been going through, you got to change the release pattern. And that means you got to hit balls and there are no shortcuts. And that is a dangerous road to go down unless you drip feed it. So the short answer is yes. And I think if someone is a casual golfer, it is better that they proceed with extreme caution. But what I would say is it's November the 3rd right now. Now is the time which is wrong because I bet you're not at your busiest now, Chris. But if I was wanting lessons off Chris Ryan, now would be the time that I would go into him in his website. And I don't know how the packages work, but I'd be like, I want a 10 lesson package and I'm going to have them all between now and March. And I'd hammer it. And then when April came, I'd switch to on course and I'd want to see you once a month. That's the way I would do it.
I've already put that request in, but it's not been approved yet. I don't know why.
He's got Rocket Yard on his admin.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's all a bit slow.
But ain't that right though, Bubsy? I mean, if I'm seeing you, I'm 10 lessons now between now and Christmas.
When it comes to March, you need to be turning exactly as you see. You need to be turning on to performance, to gamifying it, to random practice, to taking it to the course. Yeah, you want your swing changes done because you don't want to be doing them mid-season, really. And that's why I asked the question, because I think, someone at Lloyd's level, getting down to one, I think you can do that with, choosing maybe some smarter targets by doing some practice with the full swing kit, getting your wedge numbers dialed in, doing some practice chipping, some kind of, par 18 stuff, but not actually changing technique, but you can actually get a lot better. Well, yeah, significantly better just by doing the right things in practice. And as you kind of said there, Trotty, kind of the low hanging fruit, which isn't that low hanging because it still requires a bit of work. But I think, the idea that to get better has to involve swing changes is not true.
I think one of the biggest things I've picked up from doing these podcasts and reconnecting with Bubsy is targets. Targets are massive.
Oh, massively.
And again, Lloyd, that comes back to why if you start to change, and I used risk conditions in the downswing before, that's when you get into trouble. Like I would always, as a kid, be taking one side of the golf course out because I only hit one shape. And that's why I had a filthy short game. And that's why I was good. Now I got both ways because I made a big commitment to changing risk conditions. I used to play a ton of golf with a former PGA Tour winner, became a really good friend of mine. And he basically said to me, you're embarking on a 3-year change by doing this. And I don't understand why you're doing it because you simply are playing amateur golf. And he's like, you have no desire to play any more professional golf. You're a great player. You average between +3 and 1, dependent on how you're chipping. And he's like, you want to move the club at P6, which is halfway down. You want to move it 8 inches to please an iPhone. And you're going to go through 3 years of hell to do that. Completely pointless. Just leave it where it is. Because 99% of people that you play golf with cannot tell where that club is at P6. 99.5% can't tell unless they've got an iPhone in their hand. But of course, dickhead here has started the journey. And once you take the Band-Aid off, you have to go through it. And it's humbling. It's humbling, especially if you don't have a short game. Now, the next thing I want to add to this, because this is the other huge piece of low-lying fruit, that is something that Chris and I grew up through and didn't realize it was a blessing in disguise. When Chris and I were early 20s and kids, we would have used clubs that were too heavy for us as kids, and lie angles in the long irons were too flat. What the golf industry did, and it wasn't to help kids, it was to help amateurs. Everyone would have this slice and they would help the ball in. Same issues they have now. Now it's tried to be solved with shallowing it. Equipment needed the cupped wrist conditions to get the ball in the air. So companies made golf clubs lighter. They made golf clubs go higher. They made loft become more of your friend. Therefore, kids coming through started to change risk conditions on the way down, more like Colin Morikawa, more like Dustin Johnson, started to become more rotational because all of a sudden they're using clubs that are very light and they realize that they can shut the faces and hit them harder and get the apex down and hit them further. So it changes the way golf swings are. The thing now is you get guys like you, and I have another good friend who works with me, the same, Q, the videographer, who turn up. Q had a history in boxing. You've had a history playing soccer at a decent level, shall we?
I just want to add as well, I've also got a black belt in karate as well. So
okay. So strong, but yeah, karate, strong and flexible and understand how to generate power, all right? Then all of a sudden, and Q is almost identical to you, they come to me with very little knowledge about golf equipment using super lightweight iron shafts, upright, grips that are wrong for them, heads that are turned in on woods to help them turn it over, 55-gram driver shafts, and basically stood there with talent, 110 club speed with driver, hitting raking hooks, trying to control the face, can't. Low-lying fruit for me. I'm like, well, let's get you in a 115 to 1, which is still light by what me and Bubsy grew up on, to a 120-gram steel shaft. Again, me and Bubsy grew up on 125s. You just took S400s, X1s for his case, and off you went. Job done. Then it was like, let's put you on some grips that are actually in the real world rather than the 60 grip that's the ladies' grip effectively on the rack. Let's get you in some balance point swing weights that real humans with speed can play. D4. You go back in time. I sent a Mo Norman video to Q last week. D8 swing weights. That's like what Hogan used to play. E1 swing weights. And he's like, I don't know Mo Norman. I mean, that's criminal that you don't know Mo Norman. He just about knows Ben Hogan because I've shoved it down his throat. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at Q's clubs the other day. They're flat. They're 120-gram shafts. He's got thicker grips on. He's playing D7 swing weights. I'm not saying D7's for everyone. That's the balance point. But what I'm saying is, he's now gone on a golfing journey where he's like, he turned up to me as like a 5, and just by changing his equipment, he's now a pretty solid 2. And I think he's hit a bit of a plateau again, but it's like, dude, your miss tendency is now where it needs to be. Your clubs are in the game. You can feel it. Off the shelf, you can't feel it, Lloyd. You're a strong lad.
One of my questions, and I got fitted. I think it was about 6 months ago now. And we're gonna I'll get technical with you. So my irons are now. So I've got the CBs, or P7 CBs, and they are dynamic gold S300 shafts with a +4 mid-size grip. That's
and are the CBs all the way through? Like, what's the makeup?
Yep. So CBs through from pitch and wedge up to. Well, I've actually just switched it out at the top actually a little bit. So I've tried out some P770s in the 4 and the 5 iron. So I was struggling a little bit with the 4s and the 5s.
Could have saved you some cash there if you'd have called me. Cheers for the phone call.
Well, I've got a few sets kicking around the office at the moment, so I'm testing some things
Okay.
out. I agree with you. I like a heavier club, so I can actually, well, for me, I can feel where the club is, and I know what I'm doing with it. The lighter I go, I just really struggle to understand where my club face is. Going into my woods, my driver's now a 60-gram. Has this black, extra stiff, with obviously the same mid-sized grips on there again. But one of my questions was going to be, how often do you think people should be checking their equipment, getting them reassessed, getting loft and lies looked at? Because again, the swing does change from week to week, month to month, year to year. So having the same clubs set up every sort of 6 months, in my eyes, could be the wrong thing for you to do.
So here's the biggest danger. Here's the biggest danger for you. Sorry to dive in there, but I couldn't wait. So you're using S3s, which are going to be great through the winter. But as the summer comes, you've got more speed than S3s. There's step number 1. But you're in S3s based on the fact that you're about to go into 10 degrees colder, 15, 20 degrees colder in the summer. Okay, point number 1. Point number 2 is, I know you'll practice under the lights at a driving range somewhere. Those golf balls will be sat in a hopper most of the day before you get there at 6 p.m. And then you hit cold golf balls in cold temperature with a driver. That's a huge warning sign that will decrease the life of your driver quickly. So if you're driving it well, I'd only save a couple of golf balls that you've used at the weekend, your TP5, TP5X, Pro V1, whatever you use, and hit them away down the range at the end. Sacrifice them. Because otherwise, you're going to ruin that driver. And that driver, you'll need a new one come April for sure, because it will crack with your speed.
Yep.
In terms of spending the winter hitting balls off mats, March, you got to be loft and lie in those things, 100%. And then I think the biggest thing you've said here, which goes back to our low-lying fruit, and maybe we're getting the title for this podcast, how to get from a 4 handicap to a 1 with doing nothing at all. It's got to be a 4 iron and a 5 iron and a P770. I don't understand why anyone would use Tommy Fleetwood doesn't use a Blade 3, a 4 iron. And a CB is just a little bit bigger than a Blade. I use the 5 iron because I like to control it. I still think with a 5, I have access to certain flags. Maybe it's an ego thing. Got to remember I grew up on blades. So it's like, I still like the 5. But the 4 is just, such a good transition to the 7-wood. And 7-woods have come so far. I obviously play here in SoCal. Who in their right mind wouldn't carry a 7-wood is beyond me. I think it's the one club now that every bag should start with, unless you're in the UK. Maybe it doesn't then. But certainly in the States, the 7-wood is the first club you go for. Has to be. And you build the set around it. And again, at 66 to 6,900 yard golf courses, the 7-wood's a powerhouse for most average ball speeds. You get someone like Chris Ryan, who's got 7-8 mile an hour more ball speed than your average guy, maybe doesn't need a 7-wood, to be honest with you. Unless he's playing 7,100 yards golf courses. And true to form, for everyone watching this on YouTube, he brings out a 7-wood because even he knows the value of that thing is daft. But no, Lloyd, getting back to it, mate, before Chris dives in here, I would be testing golf clubs, start the season and mid-season. And then I wouldn't worry about it coming into this time of year because the truth is the winter's coming. Tell us about this little cheat stick you got there, Bubsy.
So Graham sent this through. It only came through last week, so I've not even hit it yet. So it is the QI35 Tour 7-wood. It's obviously the adjustable head, so I can change that loft sleeve. It's set on standard at the moment. That's in my spec. But Graham sent it through for me to create some content on it. But while you're here, where's this going to go in my bag? So I've got a bit of a weird setup. So I go CBs through to 5. 4-iron is a 770. And then I carry a 2-iron UDI. So how's this going to go compared to that UDI? Obviously different flight profiles, but is that going to be a pretty much a swap out the 2 and put the 7 in terms of carry?
So do you still go drive a 3-wood?
I still do. No, I go drive a 5-wood. I go drive a 5-wood.
So Lloyd, you can piece it together, right? Here's a guy, strikes it great and uses a 774 iron. Okay, but I mean, Bubsy's a proper ball striker. Because of the speed, he gets the height. Because velocity hit correctly like he does gives height. But you got to ask the question I asked because the guy is like 180 ball speed on a solid day. 175 probably normally now. But if he's playing, he's 180. So the 3-wood is no longer... He's already said at the top of this podcast, my driving is in my mind, is great. Perfect. Your driving's great. 5-wood comes in because 3-wood is irrelevant for someone who hits it as hard as that. Whereas me and you may be playing 3-wood still and using the thing because it's a valuable tool. So he then grabs a 7-wood and he's asking the right question. Where the hell does this thing go? And if you've got a 5-wood with his speed, that's almost what the 7-wood is for everyone. So for him, you've got to go driver, then consider mini driver or 3-wood again. 3-wood might go too far. So then you take 5-wood bent to 4-wood. On the modern day stuff, you can turn the loft sleeve or get a HL 3-wood. Then that makes room for the 7-wood. Because really the 7-wood's going to sit, yeah, of course it's going to replace that UDI 2-iron. But I also know that someone like Chris, when he's not feeling it, is reaching for the 2-iron and just lamping that thing. So you're getting rid of the comfort blanket of someone's game who's of a generation that grew up when 2-irons were a thing, so isn't intimidated by hitting the 2 at all. But really the 7-wood, like I say, for a modern day golfer with no history, that goes in as the pivot point. But of course, you get the one outlier in this conversation that 7-wood might not be the way to go. Now, looking at that grip that I just saw a glimpse of and looking at the shaft, I think he has to start by changing the shaft and making it way heavier than it is. He has to tip it 2 inches and he has to put a flipping big grip on the thing. The other thing, he's got a huge weight in the bottom there. He has to throw that all the way to the front because someone like Bubsy, if he mishits that and catches it low in the face, he will gain 1,000 revolutions of spin versus you and I. And if he's looking for that, if he's looking for that club to be low and trappy like the 2-iron, it ain't a 2-iron. So you have to embrace, to get answering his question, an apex that will be different by 30 feet probably when he hits that thing, especially with that shaft. It's probably not going to work. Then there's gear effect in it as well, which is where the ball will move if he hits it out the toe or heel. If he toe bangs that, which is probably going to be he's just said heel, but if he toe bangs it, that thing's going to hook like mad. If he toe bangs the 2-iron, no hook. So for him, it needs to be manipulated to get in play. That probably won't work. But the advantages of having that over the 2-iron, if he's in the semi-rough or he's in the deep rough or he's in a fairway trap, he's now got a golf club that can work. But when does Chris Ryan with 180 ball speed with driver need a 7-wood from 250 out of the rough? It's a rare golf shot that he might not need. So he's a bit of an outlier. If you put that in, you'd have to change the 5-wood and the 2-iron. And I think you'd have to go 3-wood or mini driver, because mini driver would give him another weapon as well.
Yeah.
Then you'd have 7-wood to do so much, and then the 2-iron's out. So it's different horses for courses, but for most of us, the low-lying fruit who don't have the speed that he has is to throw a 7-wood in, because it becomes what his 5-wood is.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've got about a million questions around equipment, but I'll save that for another day. But I think I've got time for sort of like maybe 2 more questions.
Yeah, go for it.
One's going to be put back towards you, Chris, as well. So we've just talked about, obviously, now's the time to put the work in to do what you need to do with swing changes, work on your tendencies, get your stats together, work out what bits are not working quite as well, and then analysing them to death. But then you come to the end of that training, it comes to the March time, and so you need to be really moving it towards sort of competitive practice. Like what does that transition look like, and what's the best way of doing that if you're looking to really kickstart the season coming April next year?
I mean, if you've come to the end of this season and you've decided that you want to put some time in, you want to make some swing changes, you want to have a slightly better technical goal swing to produce better ball striking, different curve, more distance, wherever it may be, this is the time you need to do that, as you say. But there has to come a realization that for the majority of golfers who are going to be doing that, you're never ever going to have a perfect golf swing. It's never going to be Tigers or Rorys. So you kind of have to sort of set yourself some realistic goals, do your swing work, understand what these little sort of signs are along the way that you're making progress, whether that's a shift in path, whether that's a change in curve in the golf ball, whether it's the apex coming down or going up. You have to have these little milestones to tell you that you're on the right track. And then there comes to a point, which is, as Trottie said, about March time, where you kind of have to go, whatever you've got in March, that's kind of what you need to go with for that season. Then you might have a few drills and a few exercises that you will do throughout the season that will keep you swinging that way. We touched on this a little bit in the last podcast. Your drills are not only there to change your golf swing, but also to help maintain it. So once it comes to March, whatever you've got, hopefully you've seen some changes, which means that you've done the right work over the winter. Then you have to say, okay, now I've got to go and play golf with this. And in my experience, too many golfers will hit balls in the range, produce the ball flight that's closer to what they want, and then expect to be able to go and do that on the course. And it doesn't work like that. There's 3 phases to making a change. You've got to make the technical change, which is number 1. Then you've got to go through, how do I transition this to the golf course? Because if you think about what you might do over the winter in terms of your practice, you might go to a driving range, you might go to a sim, and you might have changed takeaway, better setup, transition, whatever it may be. And you've practiced, and it starts to feel pretty comfortable. When at one stage it felt awkward. But suddenly, you've got to go make that new golf swing with that different takeaway off a situation where the ball is above your feet. You've not practiced that yet. Ball below your feet. You've not practiced that yet. A partial wedge shot. You've not practiced that yet. Maybe a fade with the driver. Maybe you're trying to hit one 10 yards further. All these things are what happens on the golf course, but you've not really practiced that. So once you feel like you've made your swing changes, you then need to go through what I call the transitional stage. How do I take this to the golf course? And that's where you would still use the driving range, but as Trottie would say, you would do it as more kind of random practice. So you'd go ball on the mat, stand back, pick a target, 7-iron, go through your routine, hit your shot. 7-iron goes back in your bag. Pick a different target, a different club, go through your routine, hit the shot. Put yourself in situations where there's some pressure. Create a golf course in the mind. Maybe even make your stance a little bit uneven by putting something under your back foot, something under your front foot. You're almost, and I touched on this a little bit in a previous podcast, you're almost practicing to try and make that swing fail. Because once you've just gone through your swing changes, you can look at it on camera and you can go, looks fantastic. You look at the ball flight and go, that's exactly what I want. That golf swing is so fragile because it's literally just been changed. You've got to now make it robust. So your practice has got to be more external on target. You've got to be trying to throw yourself out your comfort zone a little bit more, hit partial shots, hit higher shots, hit lower shots, make your stance uneven, think about what you might do when there's out of bounds on the left, what might you do when there's out of bounds on the right. And then once you start to do that, you start to get out of swing thoughts, more into external. And then you're at the stage where you can then start to take it to the golf course. And this takes a bit of time, and it's so easy to think, well, my golf swing's where I want it to be. Why can't I go and do it on the course? And it's not quite that way. So that's what I would change in March. Change how you practice. Try and, depending on where you are, the golf course you're at, if you've got an hour to practice, go on the course for an hour. Play something like worst ball. We used to play worst ball. Worst ball is basically hit 2 tee shots. You pick the worst of those, go to it, hit 2 shots. Pick the worst of those, hit 2 shots. Pick the worst of those, hit 2 shots. Really trying to dial in your resilience, the stuff that Trottie said he was great at. That's a really good way of practicing it. So your practice suddenly starts to become very, very different. And yes, you will use your drills that you've used all winter to keep you swinging the same way. But it starts to become a little bit more about how do I actually play golf? How do I score? How do I get the ball around the course in lower shots than I was doing in the previous year?
No, perfect. Okay.
Worst ball is
brutal.
Yeah, not something I'd be doing these days.
Yes, that's your normal game anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, frick. I think, yeah, it's just interesting to have these conversations. You start thinking about your own game, and I agree with all that. And I think if you look back, like I just played a lot more. There's nothing that beats going out on the golf course, even if it's just 5 holes. It's huge.
Well, when we were at the Belfry,
I do that quite a lot now. Like, so at my current golf club, I very rarely play the 18 holes. There's a little 9-hole course, got two short par 4s and all the rest are par 3s. I'll get around that in about an hour, and that's what I'll generally go and do.
Yeah.
Well, when we were at the Belfry, we'd finish working and play, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
At the Belfry, exactly. But we'd all chat. What time you finish at 3? I'm finishing at 3:30. Okay, we'll tee off at 3:45, and we just literally go and play. And it might be 5 holes, and you might have a 4 ball, and one of you might duck out after 3 holes. So you might play 9, but we played on the course, and there's no shortcut for that, And I think I've had a conversation with some other friends about, if you suddenly entered me into a, PJ Tour event and you gave me 6 months, a younger version of me would have gone to the range for 6 months, but an older version of me would hit the range for a month and then hit the course for 5 months.
Yeah, and it's hard to recreate that pressure. It's funny, I did this thing with Nelly Corder. I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but she told me that 1 ball, 1 shot, that's it. And she tees off at like 6:30 every morning, and it's 1 ball, 1 shot, 18 holes. There's no like, oh, I missed that on the left lip, let me hit that putt again. No. If you hit it out of bounds, 3 off the tee. If you freaking hit it in the water, drop it again. If you hole out, next hole. There's no like, oh, I want to hit it from this angle. No. 1 ball, 1 shot.
I remember chatting to Piers after one of the BMW PGA Championships, and Aaron played with Molinari. And Molinari was putting a ball at the back of the green, and he was saying that 1 shot. And he was grinding over this shot. And he was with Dave Allred at the time. And he was grinding, like proper, like, as if this was Sunday afternoon. And he hit 1 shot and go. And this was Monday afternoon. And he's grinding on this shot like it's Sunday afternoon. He's got it up and down it to win a major. And Aaron was like, geez, that's proper, because he realised he had 1 shot. It wasn't like, walk up, duff it, give me that ball, I'll have another go. It was like, I think it's a good mindset to get into.
But that's the pressure principles, isn't it? And Dave Allred, that's what he was all about.
Yeah.
And he's like, no one practices golf the way it's intended. Another story from the tour, I did a club years ago for Lowry in Houston at the Shell Texas Open, or whatever it was. And we're out in Houston, 3-wood, range was downwind off the left. I might have told this story before. And he's like, I'm not testing that here. And I was like, why is that? He goes, downwind off the left. Never going to tell us anything with a 3-wood golf course. All right. Off we went. 9 holes. Hit the 3-wood twice. Said to me, yeah, good, that is. I was like, it just took me I just walked 3 hours with you. Yeah, good. I was like, all right, fair dues. See you later. That was that.
Right, Lloyd. Take you on a golf course and waste 3 hours of your day.
2 shots.
Golf course is everything. And I think that, I'm listening to my own advice here. I've got to play more. And that 1 shot mentality more.
Well, talking about golf ball then, moves on to my last sort of question that I've got. I've been messing around with the golf ball a little while. I know Chris has as well, as in Chris Ryan. Used to play a TP5X. I've now gone to TP5 purely because I feel like I've got more control over it. Across the whole bag, to be fair. But I guess the question to you, Trot, is how important is the golf ball, and how easy is it to play the wrong ball and it affect your performance to quite a degree?
Yeah,
You're not just copying Rory.
Well, that was part of it as well.
Like Rory shows, I must change.
Yeah. It must be good for him. It must be good for me.
You can't do a club fitting without starting with the ball. And I personally don't think you can have a club fitting, and this is somewhat not great for a lot of golf companies out there, but I don't think you can do it in a net. I don't think you can do it off mats. And I don't think you can do it without seeing ball flight and finishing it on a golf course, if I'm being honest with you. It's like what, and then the worst thing is you order a freaking 9.5 because in a whatever, and then you wait for 6 weeks and it's not what you ordered because it's not the same build. So I think that it all starts with golf ball, and the final piece I was going to add to that is you sure as hell can't do it with a limited flight golf ball or with a ball that you don't play. And if you don't know what ball you play, then it's got to at least be premium ballpark. And I think that's what's great about that TaylorMade ball is that the 5 and the X, they've kept it pretty simple. They haven't gone to 10,000 models. They've got 2 balls. They do 2 different things. If you're at the level of Rory, then you can simply tweak the lofts and on the driver and the irons to give you the performance you want. And for him, it was obviously control and spin and stuff. No doubt, same problems for you, Lloyd. But it's a case of all you'd look at there is potentially changing the loft sleeve on the driver because you're going to get higher apex and a bit more spin. And yeah, it is a softer golf ball from that TP5. If that's what you need, for example, I don't need that, so I don't ever go for it. Never really try the TP5. I'm always the X. And it's always just a go-to for me. But I've been around this for a long time. But I think anyone listening to this, like golf ball, can change everything. Everything. Loft sleeves, fairway woods, everything.
Here's a question then, because I remember going back a long, long time now, but I used to do some club fitting back at the Belfry back in the day. And it would be quite common to have driver fittings more than anything else because that's what people kind of wanted. And they'd come in for a driver fitting and you'd sort of recommend the driver and they'd leave and say, well, so what golf ball should I play? And I was just thinking, why would I recommend a golf ball based on a club you might hit 12 times? So my question to you, Trotty, is I feel like for my game, with a putter, TP5 is great. With my wedges, TP5 is great. With my short irons, TP5 is great. And as I start to get into the longer irons in the woods, TP5X is better. So how do you make that call? Because if you, I guess, segment the game into putting, chipping, pitching, short irons, long irons, and woods, you might require a different ball for each of those. So how do you determine which wins?
So a couple of points from over the years. When golf balls became a thing at TaylorMade, the engineer would say you start from 150 and in, and you fit the golf ball from 150 yards in. Because the driver, you can change the loft sleeve, you can change the setup of the golf shaft, and the long irons, you can tweak and bend lofts. I think as things have moved on a little bit now, certainly a data program, again, that Lloyd and I are very familiar with, that will highlight areas of your game broken down into off the tee, approach play, around the green and putting that are the most impactful on your game. And that then pushes you down a golf ball route because if you said you like the TP5 putting, if putting's a huge part of your game, then you got to be pretty happy with the golf ball that you're using on the putting. Same applies, if driving and distance is more important to your game and impactful to your game, maybe you need a TP5X because it will give you a hair more ball speed. But it's easy to tweak the ball to give you those things. So I think data is a big one, but if you don't have data, then you fit the ball from 150 yards and in. Key, because the driver can be done, no worries.
All right, and Troy, so the club. I've got my what to work on, importance of scoring. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, so putting's 32%, around the green is 28%, approach is 25%, off the greens 15, off the tee, sorry, is 15%. So based off that, then I'm using a TP5. Should I be looking at changing to an X, or am I happy staying in what I've currently got?
So based off that, for a start, the early advice that we gave to say low-lying fruit is short game, categorically, has just been proven. Done.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you got to look at is your enhanced putting on that tool that we're talking about, and that will tell you if it's read or start line. So that's going to tell you your missed tendencies, and then you're going to know. Now, you're obviously playing UK, slower greens. Ball doesn't break as much on slower greens. Like, that's been proven as well. So then that pushes you down that road. Looking at that pie chart, that would indicate that, listen, flipping, he needs to be in a ball that he's comfortable with around the green. So it starts to push us towards, the question comes back to you. Which one do you prefer? Are you overspinning it around the greens? Because that then guides you another route. Is the apex too high? That guides you a different route. Like, X is going to come out a little lower, 5 is going to spin a little bit more. You know, what are you wanting? Do you like a more clicky, harder feel around the greens, or do you like a softer feel around the greens? Because your long game will adjust. So I would say that the TP5 is generally more control around the greens if you are the type of player that likes a bit of check spin, likes to spin your wedges. Does the course you play at the most require that? Like the course I'm at, the greens are quite receptive. They get, this time of year, the ball spins a ton. I don't need spin. So it's like obvious for me,
Well, that was another question as well. Obviously, as you, Chris might have some other views on this as well, but as you, obviously in the UK, you'll play different types of courses. My home course is a links course, then I'll go play a Parkland course. Would you be changing golf ball for different courses that you play, or would you still stick with the one that you've got? Because that's just for that consistency point of view. And that's a very geeky question, but that's just these things go through my head.
Players do that, and I don't like it, but people do it. Even tour players do it occasionally. Personally, I don't love it because I think the two balls are too different. That's what I think. If you're a tour player and you're so elite and you're playing every day, then I think you can get used to it pretty quick. But I mean, if you're an amateur, I don't love it.
I think my take is you're going, UK is obviously, you look at playing golf in January versus August, it's like two different games. But I always think as you're transitioning from summer to winter and winter to summer, there's a lot of changes. The temperature's changing, the ground conditions are changing. So whilst there's a lot of things that are different, I'd want to keep something consistent. I wouldn't want to add in another variable that's changing. So I've got to deal with changing conditions, changing temperature, changing golf ball coming off at a different trajectory. I think what really opened my eyes to this, and you guys will know this, and you can do this really simply. You go to a driving range, you get a really quality ball like a TP5, something that's fairly soft and spins. You go to a driving range, and you just put one of those TP5s on the mat, take a 56-degree wedge and hit like a 15, 20-yard shot. And as long as you strike it well with decent technique, that thing's coming out low. And then you just scrape a range ball in, hit the same shot, and it will launch like what looks like double the height. And it blew my mind how different, so I see people at the range, midsummer, they'll go and hit a few balls in the range. Like where I am, our range balls are pretty firm. They don't spin a lot. And they'll go and hit balls in the range, and they'll take 10 balls from that bucket and they'll go and chip with them. And I'm like, boys, what are you doing? I'm like, that is not going to perform anything like the ball you're going to use on the golf course, provided you're using a decent range ball. Probably a lot of our members use those balls in the course as well, to be honest. But if they're using a TP5, you're doing yourself a lot of harm by practicing with something that's hard, that's going to slide up the face, it's going to launch higher and spin less. So I think you've got to be trying to keep a constant. I think whenever you're doing any short game practice, try and use the ball that you play with, and I'd keep it constant through summer and winter.
And then here's another one for you, Lloyd. What ball do you play? A TP5, a white one, a Pix, a stripe? What do you play?
I play the stripe.
Okay.
Purely for two reasons. One, recently I've started using it on the tee for target lines.
Okay.
So knowing exactly where I'm aiming, going back to what Chris said at the start of the podcast, and making sure that you know your targets. And then secondly, and I know you're not, I don't know if you are a fan of this or not, but I do like to use it to line up my putts for the apex where I think it's going to start to break.
But your putting is 32%, you said, of your game.
Correct.
So what you've got to learn what your miss tendencies are, and then you're either misreading or you're missing your start line. So it's pretty easy for you. You get a gate, whether it's the Putt one. What's that company that Bubsy's involved with?
Put out.
Who are they, Bubs? Pot out.
Put out.
Whether it's them, whether you get potting plates from Ueda round here, amazing. A lot of good players use them. Whether it's just you stick down the little Cam Smith ones that he uses, get a gate. Figure out if you can hit the putt through the gate. And it's either going to be face or path. Two things. It can't be anything else. Usually face, obviously, as we've covered this in the podcast on putting, will override what's going on. Then figure out with your home launch monitor on the putting green, which is Sharpies down, 2 golf balls, 1 ball. I've done that a ton on YouTube. We won't bore you guys with it. Loft is the thing rolling correctly, which needs to change in the UK because, as Chris has said, you're playing 2 different games. Dialed, got that done. I can hit my start line, boom. Then, as daft as this sounds, tour players will test each week how good they are at putting the line down to match the line that they pick. Because Ricky Fowler had this chat with me. Some days he can get down to hit a putt, and he's in and out using the line. And he's like, some days the line just feels too low or it feels too high, and I override. Well, I was like, what do you do then? Do you go with the line or do you override it with the feel you've got? And he's like, I go with the line at the moment. Rosie's the same. I go with the line. But what happens if you ain't got the ability to put the line down on the freaking line that's in the intended line? What happens if you put it down and then you stand over it and you're like, oh, it feels like I'm going to miss low here? You've got to know your miss tendencies. And it's funny because my own putting has gone off the boil slightly this last week. Scores have gone up by like 2 shots. So I'm just not putting quite as good. I've been using a Pix forever. I'm thinking about playing just a white golf ball so I can freewheel it a bit more the next time I play because I'm getting a bit technical. So rather than change anything, just change the freaking ball. Blank spot, put it down on the white patch, hit the thing.
Do you know, there's 2 things I want to add there. I'm gonna say it was My Golf Spy. I'm hoping it was. I'm pretty sure it was My Golf Spy, who do some really good stuff. They do a lot of testing, and their testing is pretty extensive. And they posted this, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago, so you can find it on Instagram. They did a test on line versus no line. And they put, in the description how they did it. And it was a pretty extensive test. I think they did, I want to say like 3 lengths, like 3 feet, 7 feet, 15 feet. And they found that no line performed better in their test across a lot of golfers, which interested me. The other thing I was going to say there, Trottie was on about start line. I see people using a start line gate, obviously for start line, which I think is phenomenal. I think everyone should do that. There's no reason why you should not do that. But I don't see enough people working on green reading. And when I do see them working on green reading, I'll see them finding a putt and they'll put the ball down and they'll read it and they'll hit it and it'll miss, let's say, low. Let's say it's a left to right putt and they miss it low. And they'll be like, okay, I underread that. I'm like, how do you know? And they'll be like, well, I aimed there and it finished low. I'm like, how do you know if you pulled it or pushed it or hit your line? And I don't know. I'm like, so you can't tell that read. So I like the gate for green reading as well. I like to go, here's a putt, maybe 20 feet. I'm going to read it, put my ball down, pick a spot that's on that line, put your gate down, and you can only then assess what the read was like if you roll it through the gate. And sometimes that's hard, but you've got to be, because what you'll find, and I see this all the time, Trottie might agree, there's more of a tendency on a left to right putt to push it or leave the blade open. And there's more likelihood on a right to left putt to close the blade because you're aware of where the hole is relative to your aim. So it could well be that you, on a left to right putt, you read it correctly. It's left to right. You sense that. You leave the blade a little bit open. It starts a little bit right of your intended line. It misses low, and you go and misread it. And it's not. It's the start line. So I like to use start line for start line practice. But I think if you're using a start line for green reading, that's really the only way that you can assess your green. I don't see enough people doing that. I see people working on pace. Pretty easy. Start line, pretty easy. Green reading is a hard one to work on, I think.
How far out do you put the gate?
I'd put it a bit wider than I would if I was working on start line. Okay. It depends on the ability, and I'd probably give it maybe 2 to 3 feet, depending on the length of the putt. And it obviously depends on the ability as well. But I think you've got to know that you've hit roughly your line before you can start to make a call on, And obviously, you play greens in the UK, and if it's if you hit a 20-foot putt and it misses at 2 inches left, you can't call that an overread, because there's imperfections on the green. You've got to be going, ballpark, was that a pretty good read? Because we all know that at different speed, blade a quarter of a degree open, it's dropping in the hole. So it's just more to avoid these. If it missed 2 feet left, I need to know why. Did I yank that thing, or did I just overread it? And without the start line, you're only guessing.
Yeah. And then if someone, I've got 3 different size gates and I never use the bigger ones, but I probably should. How hard, I think gates are hard. And do you always look at face, Pat? Which one do you look at first? I have always struggled with gates and always have putted quite well. And the older I get, the more addicted to gates I'm getting, and I don't know if it's helping me.
I think they help. I think I try and say to people, look, if you want to put well, you're basically you're deploying 3 skills. You're deploying the green reading skill, you're deploying the pace skill, and the ability to hit your start line. Now, if you do all of those 3 things, if you get the perfect pace, the perfect read, the perfect start line, you still can't guarantee the ball's going to go in because you're putting on a surface which isn't perfect, but you've got to nail those 3 things. So if someone came to me and said, I'm not very good at putting, that information isn't actually that much use to me. Because I'm like, okay, there's 3 skills that you're trying to use here. I don't know which of those we need to work on. So I really encourage people to practice those 3 independently of each other. So if I'm using green reading, I'm kind of putting a T in the ground as a target, and I'm going back and I'm saying, read that for me. Where do you think you need to aim? There. Put a gate, assess the read. And then once we do that a few times, I'll get a pretty good idea what the green reading is like. Then I'll do a pace test, and then I'll do a start line test. And I'm using that as a way to say to this golfer, if your putting isn't good, I want you to be able to say to me, my putting isn't good because I keep under-reading putts. Or my putting isn't good because I can't hit my start line. You've got to niche down on putting and get more information. Because going back to your first question, Lloyd, if you've got an hour to practice putting, I need to know I need to practice pace or I need to practice green reading, not just I need to practice putting, because that's just too general.
So let me then get on one step further. As a good player and a good putter, if I'm external, I smash the gates every time. Once I start getting internal and thinking about setup or face, that's when I struggle. And I think I can be poor form with a gate and make everything if I get external. And it's the same with my chipping. Short game, more. It's the same with my whole game, but more. There's more benefit from 35 yards in if I have poor technique, but I'm better externally visualizing land spot and committing to it. I can get away with weak technique. Why do you think that is?
Well, I remember there's a putting guy, and I can't remember his name now. I'd love to quote him. The guy who did Sam Putt Lab. Do you know what his guy is called?
Paul Hurrian, maybe? Was he involved in that?
Another guy. Anyway, Sam Putt Lab, they collected load of data, and the stuff that he kind of reported back was, he said, technique in terms of, if you think of a perfect technique, as in a perfect path, perfect face, he said, you don't need to worry about that. He said, the best putters are the most consistent. So consistent could be, I aim way left, I always deliver the putter face 5 degrees open, which if you look at numbers, you go, that's terrible. But if you do it every single time, you might have success. If you can get your face close to 0, but it's 1 degree closed, 1 degree open, 1 degree closed, technically that's closer to 0, but if there's some variation there, you're going to be, not as good. So possibly if you're working more technical, you're getting closer to quote unquote perfect, but actually you're more, when you're external, you might not be as perfect in terms of technical when you look at the data, but you're probably repeating the same motion. And I would be dialing into that more than the technical stuff. So I'd be trying to look at what you're doing on the external putts, harness that, and then dial that in.
The visualization is just better, but I also realized I had a 12 months, 24 months where I hammered blast motion. And I realized that if I forgot it was there and just hit the putts, my ratio would be far more tighter. As soon as I consciously was trying to do stuff.
Tolerance is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. But it's all interesting stuff. And
absolutely.
Visualization, I think, is the key, right?
No, definitely.
I think
what I've learned from you is I need to get lessons with Chris. Once I've had those, I need to go see Trottie to get fitted again. And then come April, I'm going to be a scratch golfer. So let's go.
I think the one thing that
people back on in April.
the one thing people can take away from this, though, if you're serious about your game, now is the time to book your freaking 6 lesson packages or whatever it is, whoever your coach is and whatever they offer. Fill the video room, the launch monitor force place room, the range, get your consistent spot, 10 a.m. on a Tuesday or whatever. I know it's hard with work and stuff, but get that bit of daylight and get religious on your lesson, because this is where you can come out. Like, again, just to close, Alan Thompson, where I grew up on the Wirral, cracking golf coach, coached a ton of tour players and had the best juniors in the country from the north of England. And his net room at Heswall back in the day would have been full on winters, half an hour lessons, one after another. All the best juniors in the north of England would go and see him every single night he was working. And it was like after school, 5 p.m, dark, net room's busy till 8:30 every single day. And it was all elite players. And from that crew, Jamie Donaldson came out, Tommy Fleetwood came out, countless England players came out. And it was like winter. And that was key. Genius. That's what you got to do.
Boys. On it. Cheers, lads.
Lloyd, you can close out by telling everyone where they find the Dope Stroke podcast, because, I mean, you haven't had a chance to do that yet.
Well, you can find us on all social media platforms. I'm pretty sure it is all of them. All the best social podcast platforms. I got that wrong, didn't I? Put me on the spot here. And if you want to get in touch, you can email us at hello@dopestroke.com.
Might be getting the fourth chair.
Do you like the way he's been on one podcast and you said close us out and he went, you can find us. He's already put himself in the crew there.
Yeah, my man. Okay, boys, good stuff. Great job, Lloyd. Well done.
No worries. Until next time.